That has since expanded into Canada.
Very good.
Those operate in college campuses and airports, mostly in France right now. So there's lots of cool stuff that's happening globally. Also, this is a new communications tool we've just unveiled here in Boston. This is Next Stop. This is the passenger newsletter put out by us, Keolis Boston. It's just updates for passengers on things happening on the rail. Oh yeah, please, thanks.
Thank you very much.
That is also available online. And we are really excited about this, and we really want to get as much passenger feedback as possible. So share that with folks. If you want copies, I'll happily mail you some. Already cut down the trees to make them, so don't feel bad. But also,
Did you plant new ones though?
You know what? The last time I traveled, I planted a tree. That's my new thing. Is to do a personal carbon offset. So.
These are the new commuter rail cars that are coming next year?
I can't see that far, but yeah, if the team wants to procure those, it's totally their prerogative.
Actually, before we jump into more stuff, we have to do the obligatory, just quick safety briefing. If we have to evacuate, we'll meet all outside by the Dunkin' Donuts, outside, not in the building. The AED is right outside next to the restrooms. Tripping hazard in the form of these cords, so obviously watch out for these cords. And I have one with this chair, that's why the chair is there. And finally, does anybody here know CPR?
I know the Heimlich.
Oh, great.
Oh, good.
You'll need a backup after I leave, so.
I think you're very witty, actually. That's very funny.
At least one more thing. Are you set on the recording?
Trying to see that. It was just doing some very weird audio. Let me stop using my Bluetooth for just a second and just check to see if this is all sounding good. Trying to see that. It was just doing some very weird audio. Nope, that sounds good. So we're live online, streaming on the internet and for historical purposes.
Great.
Welcome. Do you want to?
Sorry, one more thing.
Oh, yeah.
The first item on the agenda after coming to order is public comments.
Thank you. This is why we have two co-chairs. Thank you very much. Anyone care to make a public comment to kick off the meeting?
You would know.
Okay, thank you, Carl, very much. I appreciate that. So, since we're both here tonight, why don't you lead the proceedings, and that way I can keep my eye on the technology and I don't get too discombobulated.
Great. Since we don't have people wanting to do public comments in the first opportunity, we'll go to the next item, which is the discussion with Keolis. And we're happy to have Justin and Dave. And if you can say a little bit more about your roles, and that would be helpful.
Great. Well, again, thanks for having us here. As you'll recall, last year we had David Scory, our CEO, come to present on performance and things we're doing in partnership with the MBTA to further improve reliability of commuter rail for our approximately 130,000 daily riders and growing. That ridership is growing thanks in large part to our revenue and marketing team. Dave Walker is the director of revenue and marketing. We felt it was important to come today and give you guys a little diversity and accountabilities. David was happy to come, but we kind of want to spread the love and get folks to meet some more folks from Keolis. I'm the public relations manager, so I'm just going to do a quick overview of service. There's plenty of advertisement out there that I'm sure folks are familiar with now. So if you're following along, I'm on slide 2. If not, that's fine. Usually I'd be speaking to it up here, so I apologize in advance if I'm looking down here.
That's not a problem at all. We're very informal. Don't let the online streaming worry you, and we're like that.
Not worried in the least, but thank you for that. So we had a target of 67 locomotives to be available in service daily. We have been consistently exceeding that goal for the past few months. We regularly go very far north of that target. We're in the 70s, sometimes pushing close to 80 as well. Same goes with coach availability. Our target is 369. We're very regularly exceeding that. When folks complain about crowding on our trains, we do remind them we are operating daily with everything that is available to operate. Lines are experiencing crowding because the service is popular, and I think this is me talking, I think it's a victim of its own success in that, right?
Can I just question the
Sure.
crowding? I understand that the commuter rail, the people don't like people sitting next to them in the 3 thing. Is that considered crowding if you have that seat empty and people refuse to sit in it?
That's a great question. From personal experience, I've seen that happen. Some trains are, at or close to their capacity. Other times, it could be a issue of bunching near the vestibules.
But is that because people are not sitting in the middle seat?
Not sitting in middle seats can contribute to crowding. We don't, this is a very unscientific
Right.
estimate, but that certainly does happen on some trains. And we do have a campaign, a middle seat campaign, where we ask our onboard crews and our customer service teams to remind passengers to occupy all 3 seats, offer seats to people who need them, perhaps more than them if they're able-bodied, and push in, put bags away. That is a huge, huge piece of making sure that people can safely board and detrain, and have a comfortable journey. But yeah, that's a huge focus.
Well, along those lines, though, there is, for the buses, and the trains, there's a technical definition for overcrowding.
Sure.
That's when you're like 110% of the capacity.
Right.
So you presumably know the capacity of the trains, with all the seats occupied maximally. So you know the boardings. So now the question is, are the number of people on the train exceeding the capacity of the train by what percentage?
So based on our last analysis of this, we have all of our peak trains are close to 90% or 95% full. It can change depending on the day. But in the past, we've had trains, when we've done counts, that have shown that those are in fact over capacity, and we've reallocated coaches. So right now, our peak trains are very close to capacity. It's tough to measure this on a day-to-day basis because we don't have automatic passenger counters installed on all of our coaches. So there's obviously day-of-week variability, and of course special events, that type of thing. But on a typical weekday, we're quite close to capacity.
And there's a line-by-line conversation as well, right? Some lines are at 110%, some are at 80% to get you to that 90%.
Well, so the last time we did the analysis, we were able to get everything down to below. I think, I don't know if you were part of that, Dave, but I think I don't recall any being over 100%. So
some were quite close.
We've smoothed that over.
There are certain peak trains that do have lower, above 7 lines, the lowest. So generally, with a few exceptions, say Fairmount Line trains have a lower level of capacity than, say, Providence or Worcester lines. Some of the busiest trains are on at the moment in terms of capacity would be Franklin or Worcester tend to be some of the busiest peak trains.
And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Addressing that, as I'm sure you're all aware, the MBTA has gone ahead to procure 80 new bi-level coaches that will add 14,000 seats a day. And we are currently in the process, Keolis is, of setting up a overhaul, or a refurbishment rather, of some single-level coaches to provide some near-term benefits as well.
Is that 14,000 seat addition the net after the retirement of the planned antique, well, not antique, the most aged coaches?
That is a good question. I know we will be retiring some. I believe 80 bi-levels equals 14,000 seats, depending on how many times we run them throughout the day. So I'm not sure if that's the net gain, but I can get back to that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Or find that out for you.
Antique.
Well, I mean, to be honest, some of the coaches are pushing 35 years old, if I'm not mistaken. Some of the locomotives are pushing 40.
Antique as opposed to decrepit, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, antique, but they're still fully functional and safe, and but they are old.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I don't mean to cast aspersions.
No.
It's Just the numbers.
And on locomotives too, as you know, the F40s are going through overhauls. The T just recently approved the overhaul of an additional 27 F40 types. So those go out for manufacturer overhauls about once a month when one comes back and one goes out.
Oh, I didn't know it was that often.
Yep.
wow.
I believe there are 7 back on property and in service. And they'll continue. Once that's done, 37 will have been redone. That's approximately half the fleet.
Are those locomotives getting, as they are overhauled, are they getting PTC, or is the PTC
Yes.
installation
Yep,
done separately on locomotives?
They're coming back fully equipped with PTC.
Okay,
Yep.
so am I right that the only PTC installation that's happening is only on coaches, on the controlled coaches in-house?
I'm not that close to the PTC
Oh,
project.
that's okay. I was just curious whether any locomotives at all were having the PTC put in.
Locomotives
in-house.
are having transponders put in here at
They are too? Okay.
Community rail maintenance facility, yes.
Okay, got it. But then again, along with the overhaul, it's definitely.
In the overall,
Yeah,
coming back with
that's-
PTC, with transponders.
That's great news.
It's a soup to nuts, it's a total rebuild.
Cool.
They
Very good.
they completely strip these down and go up.
Excellent.
I'll move over to performance. I'm going to be candid, there has been a dip recently. Part of it is seasonality with slippery rail. That doesn't account for all of it. Equipment reliability is the lion's share of our issues with performance. I will say, though, that a lot of our on-time performance up to 10 minutes is around 95+%. So our mechanical teams are able to address these. The nature of those are air brake issues, shutdowns, things that will be improved with new bi-levels and refurbished locomotives. Our maintenance, our mechanical reliability in recent years has gone up by about 19%, but we're still not quite where we want to be. So improvement processes in-house as well as the overhauls will help drive further performance benefits. Right now, for the year, we're just shy of 90% cumulative across all lines. The Franklin line in particular has seen a recent dip. I do want to address the Foxborough pilot and dispel any myths or notions that the Foxborough pilot
It was
is...
actually amazing, because that was my next question.
Sure, okay, yeah.
You're there.
The timing is, does look funny. If you're a passenger, all of a sudden there's a new pilot and my trains are delayed. I believe there's been only a couple instances in the past weeks of meets causing a delay, and even so, that was by a couple minutes. It's right now it's an issue of the schedule, I believe, and equipment reliability. It's really not any issues where the trains just start cutting each other off or not getting into slot. So it's really a snapshot of larger issues with fleet and reliability causing this. We do have a performance team that is looking at this right now. Last week there were 2 days that were pretty close to 100%, and within 10 minutes performance was 100%. So some of the things, I don't have close eyes on that and what exactly the fixes are. I know they'll drill down to one train that seems to have a systemic issue. It could be there are 50 children who board at a specific station, and then that sets on-time performance over the threshold that now they're going to run into conflict with the train once they start getting close to that station. That's the nature of those kind of sticky issues that we find. So that performance team is going to continue to work on this and try to get Franklin up to where it should be. Franklin historically has been a poor performer.
It's part of our role here is just to follow up what we hear.
Yeah.
And to be that interface that you understand what we're hearing, and right, wrong, or different. It could be, full moon could be the reason that the passengers are giving, but there is a perception, and you're already aware of it.
Of course.
There is a perception out there amongst the Franklin lining public, at least I've heard from a few folks, that, it's that darn, ever since they started with Foxborough, we've been screwed. It's human nature to grab whatever is the most recent thing that happened and blame that, but you should, it sounds like you're already aware of it, but that still is bubbling amongst riders, that's the reason.
And please share that with us too. We're happy to take, if there's any stakeholders who you guys hear from a lot, feel free to forward or email us, I'll give you my don't think I have my card, but Len has my email. Don't be shy.
And from my perspective, just because I always speak to the group, but it's a good thing that we're adding additional service in places, and to utilize track that's already there, utilize the station that's already there. We don't. I don't want this. If there were, even if there were growing pains, and I understand the current thought is that there were not growing pains. Even if there were growing pains, I don't want that to serve as a dissuade us from doing advancing expansion or additional service further down the line. Because Foxborough didn't go well. We're not doing the next one because we don't want the bad press. I think.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay.
And the T, of course, we talk to the T daily about this too. Independent of the performance issues impacting Franklin, there's a team that's looking at ridership, utilization of the 500 spaces, impacts on Franklin service capacity issues, anything like that. We'll be studying that between now and when the pilot ends or extends.
I'm hoping that in that analysis is the changes in parking behavior.
Yeah.
Because that's what I've heard, that because of which stops are served by which trains, how often, that people are finding parking harder in some cases, and different lots are filling up earlier.
There's an express train people like, and they've migrated to that, and I think that's impacted parking. Yeah. I'm not sure what exactly was outlined in the scope of the study of this pilot, but I can take that back to the T side and give them that feedback.
Times the different lots fill up.
Sure. And I'm sure that I know their parking team has been busy with the new calibration of parking fees to try to smooth over. So I'm not sure if that's within that, but I can't imagine it would be too difficult to throw into their wheelhouse. Right.
Thanks.
For the equipment reliability, do you have, not that we want necessarily, I mean, I'd love to see it just out of curiosity, but are there detailed stats where you can pin down problems on a train to the point of saying, oh, hey, this particular coach has been on trains that have been having issues and been running behind, and actually like do some correlation down to the specific piece of equipment in the consist, or is that just too cumbersome and not really worth doing? And by all means, if the answer is not worth doing, that's a perfectly fine answer as far as I'm concerned.
No, our mechanical teams certainly do. There have been times where we'll be, I'll use an example from winter last year. We're in the Emergency Operations Center for many, many hours. And someone will say, okay, coach, just from memory, XYZ had a similar issue last month. Let's take that and look. There's a system that is being rolled out across the maintenance facilities to capture inventory and history of maintenance, so we can track these things.
Okay, it's being rolled out.
It's in use, and it's just a matter of getting all of our crews and teams to consistently input all that data. So we have a room in our headquarters in downtown. It's the visit room, and so that's where we have KPIs for every department.
We've seen it.
Weekly printed. Have you been there? Yep. So maintenance is a big part of that, and specifically locomotives, of course, but down to coaches as well. They're tracked. So the goal being not to have recurrent issues. But with older equipment, certain thing, I'm not too learned on what those specific issues are, but unfortunately they will creep up due to one type of locomotive being prone to water egress. So
exactly.
Ingress, rather. We would like water to egress. So I'm looking, if you're on slide 3 right now, our on-time performance, there was a dip with the storm. I'll talk a little bit later about our storm response and our ability to recover from blizzards. So we are seeing an uptick again in performance. We hope that trend continues and we can get back into the 90s Like I said, right now, we're just shy of 90% on-time performance for the year. So we're very hopeful to hit that this year.
Right, and
Was the real dip the dip was in September-ish, or what was kind of rock bottom for you?
There are two declines I'll talk about in the past few months. One had to deal with the June derailment on the red line. We started running extra service to the old colony lines to get folks to Braintree in Quincy Center. That required extra equipment, and it really caused a ripple effect. We're very happy to provide that service, and we also made some adjustments to our customer service and service delivery teams to make sure we were capturing fares at Quincy Center with tap-in or a mobile trolley car reader. But yeah, even though we are running all of our available equipment, by having to run above and beyond that does expose some vulnerabilities. And it took a little while with that impacting our maintenance cycle to dig out. So that was the first ding on performance. And then in September, October, the schedule changed October 21st. That, in addition to slippery rail, in addition to a few isolated events, we've seen an unfortunate dip that we are slowly climbing out of. At last week's FMCD, if you saw, slippery rail certainly is one of the big drivers, but again, the lion's share is mechanical reliability. On slippery rail, I'm going to jump ahead some slides to slide 7.
And I'm less concerned about as a regular red line user who's going to take the red line in about an hour to go home, I hope there's never a red line issue again like that. So I'm less concerned with that. I'm appreciative of all the work that was done to kind of pitch in and help alleviate the stress on the red line.
And we're getting better at responding to issues like that. So we had a really good case study with the ComAv bridge replacement over the Pike. The Pike went down the lane. That happened 2 summers in a row. One side of the deck, the second side of the deck, summer 2018 and 2019. And we were able to boost some sets on the Worcester line and accommodate those riders. Sometimes if there's a disruption on one of the highways that we know is close enough to a commuter rail system, we'll call the TV stations right away and say, hey, hop on this train. It's usually a little too late to boost up our sets of equipment, but that's part of our partnership with MassDOT and MBTA is trying our best to be hyper responsive because the transportation ecosystem is all, interdependent.
And especially from a rider's perspective, we all know Kiel as well, the rider doesn't see it as
Right.
Kiel as
Sure.
But I'm more concerned about September, and I don't want to I do, but I'm not going to say I don't want to. In my mind, at least, slippery rail is more of an issue in October than it is September. To say in September it was slippery rail we're looking for I think it's stretching it a little bit. My worry is in the month of September when you have. It's a pretty nice month. It's pretty perfect weather. It's not too hot, so you don't have rails buckling. It's not too cold, so you don't have issues with the locomotive starting. Like you couldn't ask for a much better weather month than September from an operating transportation network.
Right.
And we had issues there.
Yep.
Is it slippery rail, or is it really just the mechanical issues, or is it something as simple as people came back from summer and the ridership ticked up, and it's taking longer to board, and everything's just kind of grinding to a halt. I don't know what it is. I don't want to too quickly just write it off. It's always slippery rail. Maybe the end of September, but a lot of September is pretty darn perfect.
No, I agree completely. And there are a lot of issues that impact ridership. Folks coming back from vacation is certainly a large piece of it. Again, I would say that the lion's share of recent delays have been attributed to mechanical reliability. That's the answer. Slippery rail is a contributing factor, maybe not as early as September. Definitely October. Schedule change, of course, is when a lot of issues started to crop up. But again, the trend right now is in the right direction. And obviously it's something we pay attention to every day. It's the biggest, measure of well, performance. That's what our passengers rate us by. That's what the MBTA is hyper-focused on. So hopefully we can send a follow-up to this to show you guys where performance is at. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in order to talk about fleet management, and we'll jump to workforce investments. I'm losing my slide numbers. There we are, slide 6. One of the big contributors to smooth operations is having trains appropriately staffed. So we have more assistant conductors and conductors working on property today than there ever have in the history of commuter rail. That workforce has grown approximately 25%, and we grow our class sizes. We used to have classes of a half dozen to a dozen. Now we regularly have classes of 18 to two dozen or even 30. So the last few classes have been some of our biggest classes ever. So we really hope those will help with reliability, because of course the nature of our commuter rail is a very manual operation. So they are critical for delivering good performance.
Do you have any stats, maybe not off the top of your head, maybe for later, about what's the for lack of a better term, the attrition rate? In other words, 6 months after training, a year after training, 2 years. I mean, there's got to be some percent. Is it insignificant, or is it a percent that's worrisome, or is there a trend for the attrition rate?
So the exact stats I don't have at the top of my head.
That's fine.
However, I can tell you it is something our HR team looks at very carefully. If we are to graduate or promote a bunch of assistant conductors to other roles in transportation or elsewhere in the company, or they want to go into an engineering class, that certainly does it's something we want to be aware of.
But that's good.
That's a great thing. Yeah, we're very happy to promote from within, and give people a career. That's why globally across the business, our attrition rate is far lower than most industries. Railroad is a great player. So a lot of people stay a long time. I think the average is, most industry averages, I'm making these numbers up, but let's say it's 7%, or 7 years. The railroad, the average tenure is north of 10, 12, 13, something like that. I can't get you exact numbers, we do have that.
Okay. I'm more interested actually in if there's any particular trend that's bothersome.
No.
Because, as the economy changes in general, I've been concerned that people would jump into a railroad job, get trained up, and then as the economy changes again, they want to go elsewhere, which is a hit to you if you've invested in the training, but then you're left short-handed. So again, it's more about the trend where I'm concerned about, but it's not. I'm not losing sleep over it.
Yeah, the thing I'm not seeing any red flags on.
Okay, then that's great right there.
I just talked about slippery rail. I'll talk about that a little bit more, just because there are some lines that have more issues than others. So again, 14 different lines. Performance varies. Some lines do quite well, others not so much. Fitchburg, for example, was a loser in slippery rail this year. On slide 7, the delay minutes did increase pretty significantly. And it's hard to pinpoint why. We've done a lot of vegetation management on the right-of-way. This is regular maintenance that hadn't been done for the past couple decades, so we're doing it now. That, of course, prevents leaves from falling on the tracks. So the exact meteorological reason is tough to pin down. I know in other networks they actually hire people to go out and do some sort of foliage density mapping of where they need to do trimming. Here we've spent close to $1 million refurbishing power wash machines. So these are high pressure wash jets pushed by a locomotive. We've increased the PSI which enabled these to now move at 2 to 3 times the speed. There's one north, one south. So in years past, it would take it would take a couple days to get through the network. Now we can do between services the entire network in a day very easily. So we've been running the power washer consistently as soon as slippery rail season started, and it's worked. It's worked well in some places, not so well in others. Again, not the linchpin for service issues. Definitely not leaning on that as trying to explain it away. But it is something we want to keep watching. We track delay minutes lost on each line each year to see where we might need to target.
See, this is great, but when this weekend when I have to go out and do yard work, I can tell the wife, I'm not going to rake leaves, I'm going to do vegetation management. Because I've looked at the leaf density and it needs to be taken care of.
I wish we could loan you our power washer, but
It's gonna work.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Well, in the end, I'm going out to rake, so.
okay.
Is there any sign of seasonal effects on signaling? Because I hear sometimes about, oh yeah, train delayed because of a signal issue. When I've sort of looked at what train it is, where it is, it seemed like over the last 6 months, signal issue delays were, I think, in what I saw, almost all because of PTC implementations and just glitches in PTC. But I've always wondered, are there any seasonal aspects to like slippery rail or leaf buildup that can cause interference with the signal? Because I know that it's track-based, electrical contact.
The only seasonality that I am really aware of is in the winter.
Yeah.
And we will actually ask municipalities to go easy on the salt at crossings, because that can actually cause a faulty signal. If the water and salt causes a track circuit, so we can get an incorrect signal. So I'm not sure about slippery rail causing anything.
You can, in theory, slippery rail, if you get enough contamination on the railhead, it can affect signalling. But I can't remember any examples.
Okay, just curious.
Rail networks in general worldwide, that's a known problem, where slippery rail can be severe enough it affects the track surface.
Sure. Well, is it then safe to say that when there's a T alert that goes out about a signal issue, that it is more than likely probably a PTC or early implementation glitch? Or is there just a certain amount of signal issue that happens in any large network?
It could be. I wouldn't want to commit to that though.
That's fine.
I know PTC implementation has some has to be worked into with crew familiarity. It's a tough word when you've been talking all day.
That's okay.
Familiarity, still tough. And of course the equipment and transponders, talking to each other correctly. On the signal side, I'm less knowledgeable about that.
That's fine.
But yes, I would say with a fair degree of confidence, it's part of signal issues. Whether it's the majority or minority, I couldn't say.
No problem.
On seasonal preparedness, I referenced our emergency operations center. That's at our Cobble Hill Railroad Ops Center. Brand new facility. Dozens of digital monitors that show the track networks on the signal blocks, and it uses a custom-built event management app, so we can respond to issues and coordinate across departments in real time to address issues, whether it's needing to salt a platform or there's a frozen switch. It's worked really well. There was a presentation last winter where there were 3 successive nor'easters. Performance dipped the day the storms hit. Engineers have a hard time seeing out straight into a blizzard, so trains typically operate much slower. Slippery conditions, wanting to make sure they don't overshoot platforms, et cetera, et cetera. But the very next day, on-time performance went right up to 90%. Or plus. So I think we've really figured out seasonal prep and recovery. So winter readiness, One thing I say, this is me talking, is that, you know, winter prep doesn't mean we're going to be winter immune, because day of events, things happen. But I think a real measure of success is our ability to recover quickly. We've gotten very good at that. So hopefully this is this year. As a skier, I want it to snow, but I'm a little conflicted. So hopefully our plans will be executed as intended. A couple other quick things just to highlight, and these are all, with this next activity, this is something that you're all welcome to participate in. If you don't get our newsletter yet, the newsletter from me or my boss, Troy Mazzola, I'll add you to that list. It goes out to about a few hundred policymakers, T officials, local electeds, and it's just the things we're doing on the network. Sometimes it's events like community cleanups. Our environmental team was just successfully applied for gold status recognition from APTA for our commitment to sustainability. We're waiting on APTA to formally announce it, and I know this is being streamed, but I don't tell APTA that we've broken the sphere of silence on this. But we're very proud of that. Our environmental teams work very hard to not just make sure we're being good stewards, but also being responsible to the communities we serve and being partners with them. So over the summer, we were in Four Corners, Geneva, doing a cleanup. We had crews go out in advance of the general public and other stakeholders to clean up any sharp needles, dangerous items. Then the community came in, they helped with litter removal, planting, cleanup, just general sprucing up and making the station more attractive. Because that's one of the really important things to growing ridership, is if it's not a pleasant station to be in, you know, you're probably not going to go wait for a train there. Which is what T funded a $25 million project to improve every station. This is called Station Transformation and Revitalization. Internally, it's STAR. To the general public, we just refer to it as Station Brightening. On the commuter rail, we are touching all 139 stations. The degree to which depends on their need. So some of our core transfer stations with the rapid service network are getting a lot of TLC. At North Station, if anyone travels there, you may have seen we've installed new canopies, new digital signs. We've done a lot of work on ensuring that everything is up to the latest ADA standard for being able to see the fonts at a certain distance. We've installed thousands of new LED lights, which are more energy efficient to keep the stations brighter. I know the MBTA on the subway side, Park Street, to give them kudos, is wow.
Yeah.
It's a life in HD.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So we've touched 192 stations with 3,000 individual improvements. We have just started installing new waste receptacles. We will be installing public art at Back Bay. We've repainted, we've even done some branding. A lot of attention has been given to wayfinding. We really value our regular riders, but we also want to attract more leisure travelers. So being able to easily identify that I am now entering a commuter rail station is really important. So a lot of attention to that. It's been a big source of pride for our crews. This isn't station rebuilds, but it's above and beyond regular maintenance to deliver really quick, noticeable improvements for our passenger experience, while at the same time doing the work to improve mechanical reliability and improve general performance.
Question.
Yes.
Does Keolis have a role around, not the stations themselves, but the cleaning up construction debris and things like that from along the rights-of-way?
It depends on whose project. More often than not, if someone calls and asks, we will go out and take care of it, or in coordination with the T. It depends on where. It also depends on if it could have been an Amtrak project. We're oftentimes happy just to do it. If it's someone else's responsibility, we'll ask them first. But again, it depends. It's a large 400-mile network, so it's sometimes tough to know whose debris was whose.
Where's the place to start with something like that? Because I've contacted a project group, I brought it to the FMCB MassDOT, and
Just
still,
did you just call customer service at the commuter rail?
I haven't gone to Keolis.
Okay.
Because I wasn't guessing.
Okay.
That was the first guess, but I can
Gotcha.
do that.
Where's the location?
Along the West Pike between Newton Corner and Brighton Landing.
Sure.
Or
Okay.
Boston Landing.
Going back to our community cleanups, a lot of that work is also right-of-way cleanup. Sometimes if it's railroad ties, it's pretty clear who is responsible for that.
Straps for railroad ties.
There you go. Okay, yeah.
Wooden spools for.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. If Lincoln sends you my email, feel free to email me. Sometimes it can be quickly solved by customer service teams too. They just phone it in to whomever and they take care of it. I'm happy to facilitate that too.
Thanks.
Yep. Because that's a safety issue too. If things get onto the tracks, whatnot, they can get flung. It causes runoff when it starts to deteriorate. So we want to keep it clean right away too. All right. Any other questions on performance? I'm going to kick it over to Dave to give you an update on revenue and ridership. I have some follow-up items to come back to some of you with, so thank you for those. Any other questions, feel free to email. I'm the public relations manager, not the operations guy, but I know all the operations guys and gals, so I'm very happy to get you the most up-to-date info and more detailed answers for anything that I was a little too vague on. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'll try and do this. Obviously, in the slides there are various charts, and it's quite hard to describe a chart. But we'll give it a go. So you may or may not be aware that back in, sorry, if I stand up, I'm very tall and I'm probably going to mess with you.
No, be comfortable, please.
So back in July 2017, the commuter rail operating agreement was changed, where there's effectively a revenue share incentive mechanism put in place, and that works on the base. That's a fairly normal approach that you get on most sort of commuter networks worldwide. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not originally from here, and so sort of the networks I've worked in elsewhere, this tends to be how these sort of models work. And the principle of the scheme in place that we're operating is that Keolis invests up to $7 million annually in additional operating expenditure to drive revenue, and that can be ticket checking, marketing activity, new equipment, whatever. And if revenue grows above a certain preset target, first our costs are reimbursed, and then MBTA and Keolis share any kind of outperformance beyond that. You may have heard Rob Diadamo, the Commuter Rail Executive Director, talked on this a little bit at FMCB a couple of weeks ago. All sorts of things are excluded from that regime. So the way the target is set is designed to exclude the impact of changes in gas prices, changes in population, changes in employment, effectively revenue growth or indeed revenue decreases that would have happened anyway. Those are excluded from the regime. And so it's a wonderfully complicated model that does that, but that sort of sets the target. And so at the moment, when we started this in 2017, commuter rail growth was trending at about 2 or 3%. And since then, we've seen a sort of steady uptick as various activities taken place. So now we're sort of, growth at the moment is trending about 15%. Clearly part of that is the effect of the fare increase in July, but a fare increase of 7% in July doesn't drive 15% growth. The way that process works is any fare increase is never going to drive revenue to a greater degree than the fare increase that took place. And so a large amount of what we've been seeing is due to some extent the effect of ticket checking activity, to some extent the effect of marketing.
And so presumably congestion, road congestion as well.
To some extent, yes. So there's a whole combination of factors drive it. Certainly, the kind of biggest single driver is the effect of gas price changes. That of course makes a big difference in the kind of economics of people's personal journey choices. And so the 3 areas that we focused on are around sort of internal processes for Keolis in terms of changing some of the tools and processes we use to ensure that conductors are collecting revenue consistently, changing some of the data and analysis we use. We recruited a team of marketing specialists from outside the transit industry, and we've done a lot of work which, again, this isn't going to work well without the visuals, but we've done a lot of work on changing the way commuter rail is marketed. And the third sort of strand of what we're doing is around ensuring consistency of ticket checks and consistency of people paying. In terms of some specifics, you'll have seen probably conductors now used to sell tickets with these sort of clipped, punched tickets where they have the bi-level sort of two-part rebates that they punched. That process we developed and rolled out handheld ticketing devices for all 450 conductors. That process was finished in October last year. And since then, what we've seen is a steady increase in the number of tickets sold by conductors. And that sort of is a changed trend, that up until October 2018, conductor sales had been steadily declining for many years. It's on a sort of gradual but significant increase. The neat thing of sort of rolling out that device is partly it gives us better data on where tickets are being collected. It gives us better data to inform us on where people are travelling, and it also allows people to make purchases with credit and debit cards. Of course, the previous system was if you didn't have cash, you couldn't buy a ticket off the conductor, which is a relatively kind of antiquated way of selling tickets. And so at the moment, about 25% of tickets conductors sell are credit or debit card sales, which is a sort of positive. In parallel, we've been gradually rolling out the ability for conductors to scan the mobile tickets that you can get on your phones. So the mobile ticket, the way that's checked at the moment is there's a sort of moving coloured barcode. The barcode cycles every few minutes, and so that's the way conductors check a ticket is valid. But there's also a QR code that is included on that ticket, and if that's scanned, it is automatically validated against it. Effectively, is it a real ticket and is it valid for today? And so we're gradually rolling out that process to conductors as well. We've done a lot of work around changing the way we check tickets at stations. So if you travel through South Station, North Station, Back Bay, sometimes at Ruggle, sometimes at Porter, and sometimes at Quincy Centre, we now have staff who check people's tickets before they board. And that process has been focused on trying to ensure effectively that everybody before they get on the train has a ticket, and that ticket, particularly if it's a mobile ticket, has been activated. And
that's the fare is fair.
Yes.
Campaign.
Yes. So there's generally before we do ticket checks, there's leafleting and posters on the stations, and so the process there is to ensure that everybody has a ticket before they travel, and then the conductor will check as they go through the train to be sure that the ticket is valid for the zone someone's in, the journey they're making. There is some degree of, certainly when we rolled that out, not all passengers were entirely happy about that. The logic of this approach is that generally best practice in ticket checking for a network like Boston, with sort of without ticket gates and that sort of thing, is you want to do at least 2 and sometimes more ticket checks as people travel. Because of course, if you only do 1 ticket check, people will, for example, they do, we call it short zoning, where effectively they have a ticket for 1 zone. For when the conductor checks their ticket, they don't have a ticket for all of their zones, and so they dramatically reduce the amount they pay. And so doing 2 ticket checks makes that significantly harder to do. So this is intended as a way of kind of encouraging people to have the right tickets and to have tickets consistently. There's a sort of general point to this, that it isn't fair for some people to pay and some people not to pay, and particularly there's a broader equity point across the whole MBTA system, that the entire subway system is gated, people are expected to pay, and the gates ensure that generally that takes place, and it's important that commuter rail is consistent with that general principle. And so that team is funded through this mechanism and has been carrying out ticket checks progressively since, I should know this off the top of my head, since the end of 2017 we started that process. Sorry.
Now, admittedly, this is just my personal experience, but I'm a daily commuter rail rider, Lynn to North Station and back.
Oh, yes.
It's been about a month, maybe 6 weeks since the TBAs at North Station have actually been asking for passes out, phones activated at North Station. I literally have not been asked to show my pass in at least a month. So I wasn't,
When do you normally travel through?
normally, just after the absolute peak, so let's say like 6 p.m. to 6:15 to 6:30.
Oh, they generally stop about 6:15, so maybe they've been finishing
Ah.
up. There's also, we deliberately sort of, if there are significant delays or significant performance issues, we often do stop checks because of course that's wholly appropriate. The purpose of the exercise isn't to check every ticket every day all the time. It's about ensuring consistency in aggregate across sort of the year.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I mean, I wasn't sure, and I admit, like I said, it might have just been my timing,
Yes.
but I'm glad to know that it's still a policy of
Oh, yes.
the same TBA checking. That's great.
And as Justin said, we started morning checks at Quincy Centre about 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago now. So that same team does that activity. And then the other really big part of what we've been doing is from sort of early 2018 onwards, we've been doing a sort of systematic marketing campaign on commuter rail. And the logic of that is not to vastly oversimplifying. Of course, the MBTA, a lot of promotion to customers is around giving them information on service alerts, disruption, and so on. What we've been focusing on is the effort to get more people to travel. And so, of course, that, for example, is focused very heavily on leisure riders, weekend ridership, $10 off peak fare. And so we've done a whole systematic campaign focused on using a combination of digital ads, radio we focus on quite heavily, particularly around sporting events, so we buy a lot of media on Sports Hub, for example. We do quite a significant amount of work where we use direct mail, and whilst that's a relatively old-fashioned, sort of old-fashioned marketing technique, the neat thing with direct mail is you can focus really specifically geographically on people who live in a certain walk time around the station. We do that particularly with people who are new to the Boston area. So if you buy a house, of course, it gets registered, and the same way that you get barraged with people offering you sort of housing services, double glazing, or whatever, we've now used that same technique where if you buy a house near a commuter rail station, you get a series of direct mailers from us highlighting your nearest station, the line you're on, leisure journey opportunities, and so on. And so we have a bewildering plethora of kind of tools that we've used for that. The whole logic of our campaign is the dream is to get someone to become a regular commuter rider who maybe is making buying monthly passes and making a reverse commute journey or something like that. But that is relatively hard. And so what we tend to focus on is trying to get people to try commuter rail, maybe through a leisure journey, and then over time become more regular riders, perhaps become more regular weekend riders, and so on. So a lot of the sort of overall strategy to this is just getting people to try rides occasionally as a precursor to gradually becoming a more regular user. So we've seen a lot of positivity around that. Hopefully you've seen at least some of our ads. We sort of, they're very purple, so you can't miss them if you...
There's a really good example in page 5 of the Next Stop newsletter. And we've sold, how many of these, Dave?
Oh, I
$10
don't-
weekends. It's about, I think we 700,000 or something.
So,
Very good.
So $10 weekends has been incredibly successful. We've seen a big uptick in weekend revenue. And of course, one of the big benefits from that is that weekend trains in general are not as full. Clearly there are exceptions to that, particularly if there were events in Ghana, for example, you get fairly full weekend trains. But the economics of it is that those trains are being run anyway, and so providing a sort of increased level of ridership on weekend trains through the $10 fare is a generally positive thing for people travelling on them and for MBTA.
What was the rationale behind doing the $10 for the whole weekend versus $10 a day on each weekend?
There was, when all of this, I should have said, I missed to point out at the start, all of this scheme is a sort of jointly managed one where there's ourselves and a number of people from MBTA who sort of jointly consider what we do. The $10, there was a trade-off that there are, we looked at the way weekend fares are structured on other networks in the US or worldwide. And some do $10 just for a day, some do it as it gives you the opportunity to make, kind of get more value for the whole weekend. There isn't a clear-cut, one is better than the other, and so we thought overall that the messaging around this $10 fare gives you unlimited journeys for the whole weekend was sufficiently positive that it was worth going with that approach.
Just curious. All right, cool, thank you.
The $10, you can calculate really specific kind of value propositions, but the $10 is an easy price point to market, and so to some extent it was kind of everyone felt that was the right point to focus on. And the T eventually, I believe last December, the T's board made it a permanent part of the fare structure just because it's been so successful.
Good, thanks.
I was going to take you through some of the visuals, but you've got them slides that just sent if you sort of want to see them.
Massbytrain.com gives you a good flavor.
Yes.
Or actually, the preferred website is mbta.com/massbytrain.
So there's a lot of sort of very specific material. One of our campaigns focus on creating a kind of narrative for commuter rail. So it has these. It describes to you a way on, say, a weekend, all the journeys you can make, and it calls out the destinations you can go to. So there's some kind of beautiful narrative around it. There'll be one that is a tour on the North Shore, and it's kind of breweries near commuter rail stations, and it's slightly artificially, for effect, timed to go. If you leave at 9 o'clock, you stop off at this brewery, it gives you all the call outs to that location, then you carry on to Crane Beach or something. So there's a lot of material like that where we try and build that awareness of commuter rail, despite the name, isn't just about travelling into Boston 9 to 5, but there are destinations you can use it to get to elsewhere. And it's built, there's a lot of, there's some really great comments on social media where people would take these selfies on the 3 seats of them and their family going up to Rockport or something like that. So there's a whole logic of that kind of narrative we've used.
So one question about outreach being for getting people used to. Have you worked with the perks people here?
Yes, so the T's revenue team manage the PERT program, and they are the various of the people in the T's revenue team, the people who are involved in this. So yes, we coordinate with them very closely deliberately.
All right, cool.
Keolis is enrolled in PERT, right?
We are, yes. We've enrolled our own staff as well.
Yeah, because I was thinking maybe reaching out to I was just thinking about reaching out to the employers to get a sense of maybe, like with new employees or whatever, or living, maybe you can kind of coordinate to kind of target within.
Yes.
Okay, so you've thought of it, that's fine.
We've done some similar stuff with some kind of outreach to businesses around commuter rail stations, where what we're trying to do is sort of focus on kind of co-op marketing, where they have an event. So I don't know why breweries is always the one that springs off my head. There's more than just breweries. But there's a lot of the activity where we reach out to people who their business is close to commuter rail, and we want them to make their customers aware of commuter rail as a journey option for them. So we kind of freely share our marketing materials, creative, all of that we want them to push commuter rail. So we've been doing a lot of outreach to try and reach those businesses and those routes that are within particularly walk times of commuter rail stations. So there's an enormous amount of kind of effort and thought goes into some of this to just try and reach those kind of target audiences.
Right, thanks.
I'm really glad that you mentioned specifically the North Shore with the suggested itinerary down to the particular trains, because I think that had just come out when we saw Linda and Lizzie at our subcommittee. I think it was right at the beginning of that campaign. But since we saw Linda and Lizzie at that point, it occurred to me that I think part of the success for that, and I think something that I want to emphasize here, is that is a great way to address people, the fear, uncertainty, doubt that they might see, and I think I've encountered people seeing when they look at the weekend schedule and there's the big time gaps. It's a train at 10 o'clock and there's not another train until 1 o'clock. If you don't have something already in mind, I can be doing these things between those 2 trains, as suggested by that marketing itinerary.
Yes.
I think people are less likely to be, I'll just hop on the train for a journey, because they fear, I won't have anything to do until 3 hours later. So I want to give you the positive feedback on that. I think that itinerary suggestion method is a great way to target the wide spacing between the weekend trips.
And the idea would be that this builds as a sort of, ideally, you want a more frequent weekend service. Some of the networks we run have trains every 15 minutes on weekends as well. But it's one of those areas where you work with what you've got, and it's a great return. Lizzie is the fabulous marketing manager of my team. I'm basically just talking about all her great work.
There's actually been some third parties who've come out and done itineraries for us, sticking with the beer theme. Mass Brew Bros is a blog, a popular blog, and they even did their own itinerary, visiting various breweries along various lines. So.
A bunch of inebriated people on the train.
Better let the train do the driving.
Yeah, that's true. It's a non-beer drinker, that's
What do you think the express to Foxborough is for some Patriots commuters? They're well seasoned with this.
Never gonna do it.
Sorry, quick thing, I wanted to check on time and making sure that if you have a deadline that you need to get out, that
I'm good for about 10 more minutes.
Yeah, we can take it. Keep taking questions.
Yeah, okay.
You mentioned a few things about the revenue share that you guys have going on, a few things you can do to increase that. Do you guys have any ability to change schedules to drive better ridership, better revenue in that regard at all?
The schedule changes are determined by MBTA, so there's a lot of work where a schedule change would get consulted with us. We of course have to work out how practical that is, costs, crews, improvement runs, and so on. But ultimately, schedule changes are for the T to determine.
Okay, so you're kind of locked in, I guess.
Yeah, so if a change happens, we would very much focus, a bit like with Foxborough, where we would do a lot of work to try and focus on using these same techniques to kind of actively promote people riding the Foxborough service, but the kind of impetus for the fare changes is quite rightly is a policy decision from the T. Any schedule change, there have been some positive change over the last 2 years, and we will tend to change the sort of emphasis of some of our media buys to focus on that if possible. So people who live near Foxborough stations have started getting, if you buy a house, you get the same direct mail as we do elsewhere. So we very much work with that, but we don't change the schedule.
So you mentioned the kind of revenue share was a little complex, some exclusions, some inclusions.
Yeah.
What's the reason that there's not just a simple Keyless gets a fixed percentage of every fare collected? Why is that not the model versus what you guys have kind of gone with?
I think
Or negotiate?
I think because the incentive is intended to be one way, you're driving, the operator is genuinely driving incremental revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whilst there are a lot of different models, the kind of general principle is that revenue growth due to improved increase in employment levels in Massachusetts isn't something that we've contributed directly to. It's just an effect of the economy changing. Mm-hmm. And likewise, if there was a reverse of that is true, if there was a huge drop in gas prices, revenue might drop, but that's something outside our control that might mean the revenue share didn't reimburse our costs or whatever. So the logic is to focus on the things that are controllable and not focus on the things that aren't. But there are a kind of whole array of, on some rail networks sort of worldwide, the operator takes all revenue risk and is given a target revenue level and takes all positive or negative risk. On others, they don't always take revenue share at all. And so depending on the transit agency involved, there are a whole range of different models. This is quite a conventional one, and it's a really positive one. I think we certainly always believe that this is probably a first of a kind in the US. Sort of we in MBTA haven't found anyone else doing something like this.
At least for a contract of this size,
Yes.
it certainly is, yes, in the United States.
So I think that the fact that it's driving results like this, we all think is a really positive kind of indicator of how this sort of model works.
I guess I'm always kind of curious what you guys have control over, what the MBTA has control over, what you guys kind of share control. So always come up with things like that. Do you have input into fares directly, or is that all controlled by the MBTA?
The fare changes are entirely the T's choice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we will believe the people we discuss with. We'll have suggestions. We'll kick around different ways of doing something, but ultimately the policy decisions are made by MBTA.
Okay. And one last one, and I'll kind of see if you mentioned that the contract that we have is conventional. Anything unusual in the MBTA contract that you guys would say this is really different from how the rest of the world does it, or this is a really strange kind of provision that we're adhering to, or things like that?
I think we would echo what the secretary has said, that it's fairly prescriptive. And so I know less of our other networks, of the brass wants to send me to Paris and Shanghai. I'm happy to go and take a look. I will say, and Dave's lived and worked in them, the contracts, it depends on what you want to do. And this contract is very prescriptive. This is the timetable, please operate it. Future contracts will likely look very different, and the Secretary has indicated as much, that they don't like how this one operates. They don't like the structure of it. So we could expect, future bid or whatever to probably be different. Yes.
If I Googled Keolis International, just Keolis, could I get a lot of video on the stuff you run around the world?
Yes. Our group website, I'm sure Justin can send it on, it covers all of the network requirements.
So I just Google Keolis and it'll be keolis.org?
It's keolis.com. So our biggest networks, or most networks, I understand, in France. We're a French company.
Oh, yes, I know that.
We operate we operate, I think, one of the largest tram networks in the world in Melbourne. We run a large automated metro system in Doha. We run buses, express coaches out of Montreal. So we have dozens of operations in almost any sort of imaginable transit mode.
Do you run any local ordinary bus without?
Yeah.
So.
You have the U.S. too.
Yes.
Where? When in the U.S.? Do you remember?
Las Vegas, Southern California. Yeah, and Greensboro is very exciting. The United States does not operate a lot of electric buses compared to other countries.
These are electric. I meant just ordinary buses on the street.
Oh, these are ordinary buses, but they are electric.
But they're not electric overhead electric.
No,
they're diesel electric or battery powered?
I think the battery.
Battery.
Yeah.
So our Keolis' North America group has sort of heavy rail, a Canadian division that does a lot of activity, particularly express coaches, and then our transit division the headquarters for the transit division has just recently moved to Boston, California, and so we're now all in the same office with the group that run our sort of bus and taxi networks
and trolley networks too.
Yeah. So we operate. I honestly can't remember. There are many networks where we operate, generally under contracts with PTAs or member states.
Right.
Our parent company is SNCF, the French. Well, one of our majority shareholder is SNCF, the French National Railroad, and the first operator of high-speed rail in the world.
So we have a few people work at our HQ from SNCF who have sort of been seconded and come to bring their expertise to our operation here.
Len, and then I'll ask a question.
All right, so can I ask two?
Sure.
There you go.
Please.
So in two very different questions. So you didn't notice any drop in ridership with the last fare increase? Or did you?
The revenue seems to suggest the opposite.
We haven't. I certainly don't recall seeing anything that suggests a drop-off in ridership since the fare increase.
Yeah, because the reason I asked about the ridership, because it would be funny if the ridership dropped in the lower price zones, but maybe increased in the higher price zones, so you wouldn't see the drop in revenue. In fact, we might get more revenue, but still. So I was just kind of interested in the elasticities, because if you're telling me that there was a positive elasticity with this last fare increase, that would be like novel, So yeah, so all right, that's fine.
I mean, you're right. I'm not aware of any system where a fare increase doesn't, to some extent, reduce ridership.
Right.
So that would be, actually, there are very odd examples, but no, I mean, you certainly would expect a fare increase to have some suppressive effect.
Right. Well, the reason I asked though is that because even though the fare increases I thought they were fairly moderate, because one of the things that we pushed for as a committee from early on was that we wanted to have regular small fare increases, because whereas elasticities are pretty linear for most of the curve, when you get into the very low ranges, it's not it's not linear at all. In fact, you can't imagine a fare increase so small that people hardly even notice it. Now, this was noticeable, but still, if it's below that threshold where it really impacts the ridership, if you were to get a positive elasticity, that would kind of support that whole notion that you do regular small fare increases instead of like these big, like 25, 30% fare increases every, 4 or 5 years. So the second question, the whole AV thing, in Vegas, was that last mile type stuff, or was that larger range? And the places where you're expanding, once again, is that last mile, or is that the larger range of transit?
It varies. So the example in Vegas was being run in partnership with the RTA there, and was sort of largely tourist orientated. It ran around a sort of area around near the Strip. We've done an AV trial, I think it's Candiac or Candiac.
That's operating now.
Montreal.
Candiac, yes.
We also run various in France. They're often student campuses, a particular business district, something like that. So they're often in a localized area, but that not exclusively so. So there are some where it's a sort of effectively first to last mile from a transit point across a business site or something like that. So it does vary. We also do. We sort of run the more conventional sort of commuter shuttles as well, all around the world as well. So sometimes it's AV, more commonly it's a kind of conventional vehicle.
All right, thank you.
I'll add that those are, as Dave said, typically fixed route and also free, as they would typically complement an existing service we operate. I'll email you a recent press release from Kiel's group in France. They did just introduce a new AV service that is in mixed traffic. So we're on the edge of this and exploring and adjusting as we go along.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Len, well done. You got elasticity and an AV question in back to back. Checked your 2 boxes. Boom. Good for you, sir.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it.
I'm wondering about upcoming bridge projects, because just to give you feedback first, I've heard anecdotally that the Gloucester Drawbridge service impact from the people transferring to bus was really minimal. In fact, somebody said to me point blank, it was a really nice ride, even though I had to get on a bus to get all the way to Rockport. They were actually really happy about, not happy about being able to get on a bus, but the overall experience was a good one. I also heard very good things about the fast bridge replacement at Reedville. I can't remember if it was 2018 or 2017, but that seemed to go just swimmingly. I'm thinking forward, are there any more significant bridge or infrastructure replacements that's going to impact schedules or require like far in advance planning and getting word out to customers above and beyond like regular seasonal things?
There are 3 bridge replacements that were just recently approved by FMCB. Nothing that is coming to mind that has been flagged as disruptive.
Okay, that's great.
Or significantly disruptive.
Yeah, I'm thinking I know there's an overpass bridge by BET that's going to cause the Lowell line to get rerouted around, but that's more of a reroute. It'll just be like a little bit of a slow track through one of the interchanges, not really a disruption. And then when the drawbridges at North Station get replaced, last I heard was it's going to be add a new one, get rid of the old one, add a new one, get rid of the old one. So the theory was that it wouldn't impact service there also.
Yeah, I haven't seen designs for that yet.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we can stay ahead of the game on any major project so that we can give feedback as appropriate for anything that's, affecting customer daily life.
To my knowledge, Gloucester will be the biggest one in the foreseeable future.
Okay.
Until we, start talking about, shovels in the ground with the Alston intermodal. But like a lot of those are a lot like that, the signal tower bridge, drawbridge. A lot of these are still in design. So
okay, that's great.
Thanks. I want to be conscious of your time. So it's been
20
As always, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, greatly appreciate it. Forgot to ask, that's not real question. If with your permission, we'll post online that slide deck. Is that acceptable? Or is that not for public consumption?
Is okay for you?
It might take a couple hours.
That's fine.
Put in some stuff. It's just without context, it would look a little
Sure.
different.
We'll give you some clean ones. How about that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, yeah. Only because there was so much that we discussed that was relevant to the material you had, it would be great if we could share that with people, so if they're watching the YouTube video, they could say, oh, right, they're looking at this chart.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thank you very much.
So we'll send you a new one
Whatever.
before.
After the holidays.
Yeah, there's no rush.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, before the end of the calendar year is fine.
That's very interesting.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks.
Yeah, have a great holiday.
Safe travels.
Travel safely.
Take the commuter rail.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Great to meet you. Or again, see you again.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
See you again.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's more copies of that.
All right. Next on the agenda is subcommittee meetings.
I would suggest that we do CIF after MCOP so that we can just kind of go into new business with the letter that Ryan's going to.
Okay.
Sure, that sounds good. I'm going to pull up my notes, which will take me about 30 seconds.
Okay.
Feel free to let somebody else jump in while I'm pulling up my notes.
I have to miss it, so I can't tell.
I'll say it's MPO meetings are just kick butt lately. You should just go and check out the agendas and the presentations. It's just.
We were lucky enough to have Dave Carney again. He spent a significant amount of time talking about, was it Sullivan Station?
Yes, thank you, that's right, yes. We talked about Sullivan and the general area surrounding it and how the redesign has vastly improved the routing. It's not perfect. He called out a specific thing where the layover, the operators need to be encouraged to, is that putting it in the right way? The operators need to be encouraged to lay over in a place where it serves the customers best.
So put a different way, so Sullivan Station, they took out some parking spots to add additional spots for buses. And one of the advantages to this is that a bus can lay over in the spot where it's departing from. And that just leads to a better customer experience because a bus may not be leaving for 5 minutes, but they can park there. If you're there early, you can get on the bus, and there's no like, why is that parked a block away? Do I need to walk that way and walk back? And it seems to be working very well. And overall, everything seems to be working well there. But apparently, there are some old school drivers who don't want to take their 5-minute layover with people in the back of the bus. So they still park down the street. Quasi layover. They lay over in an unofficial layover spot before going forward.
Can you discuss? You talked about canopy, right? You put a canopy.
Yeah, that was my idea. We talked so much about I don't think I realized, it was interesting to do a deep dive into the number of routes that leave out there from a bus perspective is insane. And we don't think of it as an intermodal facility. We think about it, bus riders do. But for somebody who's not an usual bus rider, I think of it as just that it's an RFI stop. And so realizing that, there seems to me to be tying in with this redesign of where buses now lay over, where you pick up buses, there is an opportunity to do better than just typical bus shelters that you would find at a small stop. That you have an opportunity that some of the stops there are underneath the highway, so they're protected, but now that we have the kind of broader space there, you have an opportunity for, I'm not saying nothing costs money, but for relatively little money to really make that a true station and put the example I use is in Kenmore Square. You have, when they redid Kenmore Square, they have that kind of cool arched Uber bus platform, something of that nature. It's still open air, I'm not talking about putting heat or anything, but kind of to treat it more like a intermodal station. The intermodal station that it is, than just simply being a subway station that has to have a lot of buses with individual bus platforms and individual shelters on it.
Sorry, I can't help but add a quick side note about Kenmore Station, that in the summer it doesn't provide shade. And when there's wind, it provides very little wind protection.
That is helpful. So it should be functional in addition to good looking.
We also talked a lot about the replacement service that happened, a little bit for the Orange Line and how it was a success, but I also specifically asked Dave to join us at that subcommittee meeting at this month because it was right before the kickoff of the Red Line replacement service for all the weekend work. And David said that...
To stay away.
But that,
No, Friday night.
yeah. He said that they were very optimistic that the Red Line bus replacement for that weekend outage work would be even more smooth running than the Orange Line did because of a simpler route and all the coordination they had done with Transit Police and City of Boston around Andrew to make extra room available for boarding and disembarking from the vehicles. So very optimistic, Dave Carney, about that Red Line replacement.
Optimistic, but I think I think he was very honest about the reality of the less than ideal user experience when you do these busing.
Oh, absolutely.
They can do the best they can, but this would not be the ideal weekend to expose a friend or loved one to the teeth the first time. They can do all they can, but it is a imperfect. You have to go disembark, take a bus through the winding cow paths of downtown Boston and emerge on the other side and reboard. So
Right. That's true.
I just want to temper that. This is going to be great. It was like
oh yeah,
this isn't going to be as awful as I thought it was going to be. It was more like the feeling I got.
Right.
Step out empty and more glass half full when you're
Well, that's true. Yeah.
So
My motto is
maybe more accurate.
my motto is that I see the world not just glass half full. My glass is 2/3 full. That's how I see it.
I forget the timing, but did the topic, if it was after the FMCB voted to direct the establishment of rail transformation office and a bus transformation office, was that topic?
Yes, it was right.
I don't recall.
Okay. What's the topic?
No, I thought did we briefly cover that or no? I'm imagining it.
I don't recall. I mean, the FMCB had voted that a couple days before on the rail vision of electrifying
Yep.
to Lynn and electrifying Fairmount and adding EMUs. I don't recall anything beyond that though. I mean,
Bus-
but
I thought we addressed it briefly, and I think
I didn't recall. I'm sorry.
I mean,
I think he was more concerned. To him, it was whatever. They're going to change my routes in 2 years. They'll change my routes in 2 years. I'm concerned about getting through this weekend.
fair enough.
And then I could be putting the words in my mouth. I don't remember. I thought it was kind of a practical response.
Yep.
I wasn't opposed. It was more of a cover that we get to.
Yeah. One more note about the Red Line replacement buses, which I think is also good news. The post office and the MBTA were able to negotiate the use of the Dorchester Ave, normally private to the post office strip along Fort Point Channel, so that there'll be a one-way, it's only one way, but still, they said it's a huge improvement. They have to go 5 miles an hour, the MBTA buses, 5 miles an hour with flashers, but I took a note that the MBTA gets priority, but that can't be right. I think the post office still gets priority. Yeah, so my note
There
is
were
wrong.
limited hours on that, though.
Yes, exactly. 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday. But the note that I did take said Dave said it's going to be a huge improvement to have that normally off limits sort of bypass behind the post office.
This is a total aside to the busing, but it would be ideal if that was actually Dorchester Avenue just continued to be open for all traffic.
Yes.
And we didn't have a massive mail facility down next to it, next to the region's largest transportation hub.
We talked about some details of.
No, I was busy.
Okay.
Just making eye contact, I was just kind of communicating in addition to eye contact. So sorry.
That'll change someday. The economics of that parcel will have to switch over.
We also just talked about some nuts and bolts bits of other projects. I don't think it's anything worth calling out other than I showed some photos of some circular black and white targets that we, I think, reached a consensus were probably a survey at Boylston Station for some potential, and this was news to me, I didn't realize until we hit the subcommittee. Apparently there's a study going on to see if the Green Line curve at Boylston, which is I think almost a 90-degree tight turn, can be eased if it can be reconstructed somehow to become less of a tight turn. And apparently the survey markers that are down the station are the beginning of that project to analyze the load points and perhaps lay out a different track plan and platform area at Boylston. So that would be great news because I've heard that there's a pretty serious speed restriction around that curve, and the amount of wear and tear on those tracks because of the curve is significant. I think that's it for marketing, communication, operations, unless I missed anything notable.
All right, thanks.
So yeah, all right. I sent out an email yesterday with the letter, but I guess I'll pass around to start, and then we'll talk about the other things we talked about. So, I turn to the other ones.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
All right, so before we get to the letter, which I think we talked about last meeting, which I know I just put in front of everybody, we also talked about a survey that Andrew's team had done at the Central Business District, and please correct me when I step out of line because I'm not the expert and whatnot. A survey on getting to central business districts in eastern Massachusetts. So you guys had four regions that were involved with this. Going off memory, so Arlington, Hingham, Hamilton, and Framingham.
That's correct.
Got the four. So not the densest of communities. I think Arlington was the most dense of the four, but also not the least dense either. So I think kind of in the middle. And the survey went around and asked all folks, or asked all businesses, how do you think people get to your business? And there was a range of businesses involved. What's the mode of travel? Is it car? Is it walking? Is it biking? And then, taking that data, went around to actually on the street, asking people who showed up at these businesses how they got there, and then kind of did a comparison. So I think what stood out to you was that, at least Arlington, businesses greatly overestimated the number of folks driving by car, as kind of expected. Right? I think the general perception is businesses seem to think that most of their customers arrive by car. More of their customers arrive by car than they actually do. I think that was statistically significant. I'm using the term right in Arlington.
I would not say that
Oh,
it was
okay.
statistically significant. I would say that given what we got for data, we could say that businesses that replied to our survey overestimated the percentage of customers who drove. They underestimated the percentage of customers who lived or walked within, lived or worked within walking distance. That was the Arlington piece. Sorry.
Sure. And then the idea, I think, or potential use for this survey data is saying, let's think about how we're using the curb space. Let's think about how we're using kind of travel lanes in and around our central business districts to maybe reallocate to pedestrians, to bikes, to transit in a way that makes sense to how people are actually using the travel lanes. So trying to get some hard data behind actual uses. So I don't think there was anything you guys had planned for a follow-up necessarily from that. It was kind of a contained survey, but anything you want to?
There was no specific follow-up for that study planned yet, but there's a sort of concurrent study which is wrapping up and will be presented to the MPO board the first Thursday of December, which I think is the 5th, that we've called The Future of the Curve. And it's basically looking for specific examples of cities who are reconfiguring their buildings to address certain conflicts, whether that's more passenger pickup and drop-off space, more commercial vehicle loading space, more space for transit services and bus lanes and bike lanes. And we wanted to sort of go out and find good examples of innovative sort of reconfigurations of the curve and consolidate that into a resource that municipalities here in this region could use. May have an update on that in the next week.
Yes, that's good. I'm so looking forward to that. Tell you how much, curbs. Yeah, well, yeah, curbs.
Any questions for Andrew before we move on?
I actually have an objection. I'm not willing to sign on this.
We're not there yet. But
I'll just tell you what part I don't like. Is that all right?
We're not on that topic yet.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
sorry.
hold off thoughts. That's we'll get there. Just any
Sorry.
questions for Andrew on the study? All right, moving on.
Oh, I guess maybe for the people watching. The study results and all of it can be found on ccps.org?
Yes, ctps.org, and there's a meeting calendar. It was presented on October 17th.
Okay.
November 17th, excuse
Okay.
me, November 17th.
Yep.
Find it in the meeting materials.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right, moving on. The other thing we talked about was just a structure for the 2020, which the year sounds scary. The meetings that we're going to kind of talk about. So I guess I would ask anybody on the Rock in general, if there's anything CIF related you want us to address in the next year. You're not next 12 months because December is whatever. The next year, let us know. We'll take them under advisement and see if we can incorporate them into our plan, as it were. We're just kind of going to sit down in December and pull things out of the universe. So this is your opportunity to kind of bring things in, and we'll get them on the agenda and bring them back to the Rock in some sort of fashion. So speak now, or email, or
This may be beyond the scope of what you want to take on, but in listening to an interview on Commonwealth Magazine's podcast with someone from a Mass High Tech Council or something like that, I don't remember the exact group name.
Yep.
Raised objections to, or expressed objections to raising revenue without plans in place, and at the same time, the T's capital investment plan requires funding to be in place in order to program things. And it seems like that's kind of a catch-22. And sort of addressing that,
Well, there's a difference between raising revenue and having plans with funding in place, because
the objection was, let's not raise revenue until we know what we're going to spend it on.
well, that's fine. I mean, I don't think that's contradictory, or mutually exclusive at all. It's saying, like, if we want, because like T4Mass wants to increase revenue, means that we have more money for transportation. And I think it's good to say, well, yeah, show us a plan before you do that. Because right now, we do get money for the capital budget. So that's not raising revenue, that's taking the revenue that we're currently getting. And so, yes, you do need to have the money before you start developing a program. So I get that. They're not mutually exclusive, right?
Well, how do you address the objection to raising revenue that you need to have plans for it, but you can't make plans for it until there's kind of, you make budget-constrained plans, capital plans.
Well, let's make sure we're talking, we mean the same thing. When you say raise revenue, I'm thinking that you mean that we want to increase the rate at which we get revenue to spend on capital projects. Is that what you mean by raise revenue?
Capital and operating.
Okay, so, but you do mean going beyond what we currently have. That's what you mean by raise revenue.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So just say, yeah. So if you're gonna say, okay, we want the citizens to pay more money into the system, then I say, yeah, well, show me your plan, so that I can support that. That's very different than saying, okay, well, here's the.
Well, the planning's budget constrained, and like.
Well,
anyway,
the
I
current
don't know.
planning isn't, no, so right now, we do have revenue that we spend. Right?
My understanding is CIF is, like, the 5-year plan is budget constrained.
Right, based on the money that we currently have to spend.
Yeah.
Meaning that we get a certain amount of money, that every year right now, and we know how much is coming. So we plan based on what we have, what we know is coming. So you're not going to develop a project that's beyond the money that you know you have coming in.
But if you're not developing those projects, how can you make the case for more money? Anyway.
But that's different. It's just that, so if we want to do like this big new project, that's beyond what we have, and it's going to require more revenue, then I think it's okay to say, well, show us the project, so that we can decide whether or not we want to support it. So that would be beyond the current CIP process.
Mm-hmm.
That would be like the envisioning process. Maybe part of the transformation, office, whatever they're developing. It would be their job to say, show us this vision with some detail, so that we can now sell that to the public, so that they will support the increase in revenue. I don't see it as a catch-22.
Okay.
So I appreciate the catch-22 reference. I don't read a lot of books, just read that one. Do you have like thoughts as to what action we would take, or are you just saying like here's something you noticed and it's something we want to explore? Do you have like a particular take on that at the moment?
The thing that I'm worried about is there's so much concern to live within your budget.
Mm-hmm.
And the budget is constrained both for operating and capital, that living within your budget isn't permitting people at the T or contractors to look at things and study, plan, that enough to make the case for significant additional revenue, whether it's capital or operating.
Well,
And I'm just afraid that we're stuck on that.
Well, two responses to that, and that is I think T for Mass, with their big push to get the legislatures to spend more money on transit, they would be in favor of that kind of, envisioning, to get the legislatures to support what we will need in terms of more revenue. And also, I think on the 16th, T for Mass is having 1 year revisit the state's capital, the future transportation report. And part of that was that we need to kind of envision what we want to do along, like they presented 4 scenarios, maybe 6. And I think really the next step is to pick one of those scenarios and now start developing, visions around that, plans around that, so that we can go to the public and say, okay, this is what we want to do. And maybe like the 25%, plan, this is what we want to do, but we need more revenue, will you support it? And so I think that's how we get to the point where we can do something beyond what we currently have. We can discuss it more, of course.
No, I think it does tie in nicely to we had plans to talk about the capital budget, the operating budget, performance, things like that, so I think we'll tie nicely there. Any other suggestions from anyone now? Or should we?
From me, not fully formed yet, so
Sure.
I'll save it until it is.
Time check, we're at 1/4 of, so we have 10 more minutes before public comments.
Should we move on to the letter?
So considering that we probably have only one person who would want to do public comment, do you want to speak at the end? Okay, cool. We'll make sure we allocate at least 5 minutes. Great.
All right, so, well, I'll talk about the letter generally, and then we can talk about some concerns. What we were trying to do, I think Andrew brought this up, I forget the timeline, I think you brought it up last meeting. We had talked about it at the CIF a couple times. Transit Matters put out a regional rail proposal in 2018. Earlier this year, they also put out a regional rail proof of concept specific to the Worcester line and kind of some improvements at South Station and just kind of some targeted improvements to operations there, some track alignment, some track signaling improvements, kind of speed restrictions, things like that. And then, of course, this month, the FMCB voted in favor of the regional rail transformative approach going forward, so I'll want to come on that. So what we wanted to do was take a position, not a very hopefully controversial one, saying that we were in support of essentially all three of those things. We're in support of Transit Matters vision. We're also in support of the FMCB's regional rail vision. So that's kind of where the letter starts. We also talk about the benefits to regional rail in the second paragraph. We also talk about what Transit Matters is outlined as regional rail. And then in the fourth paragraph is kind of where I editorialized a little bit. I was wondering if this is where Karen's objection is, but two things that were, in my mind, a little bit outside of Transit Matters, and one was kind of in the same scope. But one is, I really believe, and I think they touched on it, Keel's touched on it a little bit today, is to get a very balanced commuter rail system, we really need balanced travel. We need reverse commute. We need jobs spread throughout the nodes. We can't have all the jobs in downtown Boston. We can't have all the people living in Boston, and we can't have commuter rail stations out in places like Lincoln. I think Lincoln's a very low-dense area. Low-dense areas where people can't walk to these commuter rail stations and really enjoy the benefit of the trains coming through, and people need to drive. So one of the things I added in was advocating for more density around outlying transit nodes. And really that hasn't worked at the local municipal level in the past. The local municipalities don't seem to want more density. So advocating for something being done at the state level on the zoning front for transit around kind of the state-owned transit areas. And the second was something that kind of came out of the Transit Matters report, was saying, we have a pot of money to spend, and there are better ways to spend it than on South Station expansion. Let's look at these regional rail lower cost improvements first before spending the pot of money we're thinking of potentially spending on South Station expansion. So that's the letter in a nutshell. I don't know if there's strong thoughts one way or the other at the moment. We'll hear Karen's.
Well, my only strong thought is I will not go along with the South Station expansion. I think that's up to the T to find out where to get the money. I don't want to put any, we may not think of that, but I don't want it in that letter.
But maybe we should double check the language. The language here is saying that the money should not be spent on the South Station expansion. It would be better spent on regional rail transformation.
Right, I think
So-
we just keep that, if that sentence is gone, I'm fine. But I'm not fine if that sentence is in there.
But I'm missing your feeling. Are you saying that you're in favor or not in favor of the South Station expansion?
I'm saying I don't want anything to do with it, let somebody else make the decision on where the money is. I haven't really thought about South Station
I see.
expansion, but since I haven't thought about it and I don't know what the reason for it is, I'm not
I
going
see your
to
point.
sign on. The other stuff is all good.
Oh, the reason we have that in there is it was a big part of Transit Matters' position, was that it wasn't a necessary step at this point. So they did a decent amount of analysis, and that was their conclusion as well. So trying to kind of keep consistent with their thoughts was supporting that piece of it, but understand if you don't get, do others agree, disagree with that?
I'm in full agreement. Yeah, I do agree that the South Station expansion expansion plan should be immediately put on hold. And particularly, yes, that funding that was allocated for that to go towards the regional expansion plan. I couldn't have said it better myself.
First, I commend you for.
Sorry, 5 minutes.
I'll be back. I commend you for writing up the letter, taking the time to do it. I commend you for taking the position. I feel like far too often we do not take positions on things. I'm on the fence about the whole thing altogether. And for those of you who know me in the committee, you may not be fully surprised. Commuter rail ridership is 10% of daily ridership on the MBTA. I struggle generally with how much money we should be throwing into commuter rail and subsidizing people who choose to live an hour away. If you choose to live an hour away, you're choosing to live an hour away. Should the T be subsidizing your choice to have a big house in a big suburb an hour away? I struggle with that, But
what if that's all that's affordable? Because a lot of people who are living out, aren't living, in big fancy houses. They're living, in places where, their rents are cheaper, and that's what they can afford to do.
I would argue there are other, you're not getting as much land, you're not getting the same size house, but there are other cheaper places to live.
No, not when we looked.
And we're going to get into an argument.
I know.
I'm saying, but it's not everyone that. Whatever. Go ahead. Never mind.
No, but I think that's where my problem with with the Transmatter idea is. Great, we want to increase service everywhere. We want to expand service everywhere. We want everything fantastic.
But all that money is spent on relatively few people.
Right. It's on relatively few people, and I don't know. I don't know if we're going to play the game of $2 to $3 billion, if we're going to say, well, let's not spend $2 to $3 billion on South Station expansion. There's other ways we can spend it. All right. Well, I would spend that $2 to $3 billion on Blue Line to Lynn or buses. If we're going to play that game, if we're choosing a fixed pot of money.
I believe that part of the reason why the FMCB chose the sort of 5.5 alternative, in between the 5 and 6, was partly because it showed a significant increase in ridership overall. I mean, there was a lot of caveats and things that weren't studied, and the parking models were not fully done. But my recollection is that the idea was to get people off the highways and out of cars by doing that regional expansion. So it's not like, I hear your point. I disagree with your interpretation that spending money on a small population, because the goal is to spend money to broaden the population and get people into a more sustainable form of transportation.
Yeah, and I don't think it's either or too. I don't think it's like, they spend money on this or they spend money on rail. I think it's more like, what's the vision for rail?
I guess my problem is somebody correct me where I'm wrong. Their vision for rail that we're echoing here is, let's expand it, let's double down on everything. Let's run more frequent service, let's put more stations, with more course. It doesn't seem to be targeted to me about, it's not necessarily saying we should expand rail to help these certain communities, or we should expand rail for these environmentalists. It was just double down on commuter rail. And from an economic perspective, I don't know if that's the right one I'd double down on.
Well, the environmental was.
Just time-wise, we're at time that we need to
Wrap it up.
Public comment and wrap it up. I don't know how we deal with this with these letters, having been through.
No, I think if you guys think you have the votes to go through it now, there's nothing wrong with you guys voting something and having a lone either dissenter. I don't have any objection to that at all.
I'm with you on, unless that part is out, I can't
Well, it sounds like maybe we should table it till next month for more discussion.
But the problem with these things too is you got to strike with it on top, right? There's a current topic and you want to move forward and support it. There's an urgency to these things as well, so
Well, we could vote it, and still discuss it later on. I mean, I think, because I do have more to say. I mean, I'm in support, but I would like to deal with the things that you brought up because I have responses to them.
No, and I would love to hear those,
Yeah,
because I'm not steadfast in my beliefs on these. I'm trying to figure out in a limited pool of money
Right.
specify what is the best thing to do for the buyers and
The
the
other
buyer.
thing we could do is have just the people that are in support of sign it. Don't sign it from the Ryder Oversight side.
No, but I like the idea of us just, the committee taking stances on things, whether we all are on board or not, as long as the majority of the committee stands for it, then
Yeah.
I support that.
I've been in your position where it's like, well, I want the group, and I'll work with the group size. I'll just say one phrase, there is a limit to density at some point, and so we can only get so dense here. So we have to think about a future, it may be further out, how do we service, an area that's larger than the most dense area? More than the phrase, sorry.
It may be helpful for us to send around those reports so that everyone can read them and see Transit Matters, the case that they present. Because with the exception of the South Station expansion issue and the North-South rail link issue, the rest of their points are relatively low cost in terms of, when we're talking about billions of dollars, you can lop at least a couple zeros off of that. We're talking about clock-based scheduling, we're talking about modest signal and track changes to South Station, and really just getting more into what are sort of existing global best practices. And there are things that they outline in that report, which I cannot recite off the top of my head because I don't have it all committed to memory, but where they feel we are not being as efficient as we could be. And that was the heart of the Transit Matters piece. The FMCB, they did vote to do as full a transformation as you could imagine. And that part was folded into the letter just because it was timely.
So I think Stefan, you did send out the link to the group.
Yes, I thought I sent it a month ago, but I sent it.
So,
I
Several hours ago.
urge everyone to read them.
Well, I'm going to make a motion to approve the letter, and let's take a vote on it.
I second the motion.
And with a discussion, more next month, whatever, but so we can get it out of there. So he seconds it, let's do a vote.
In favor? Opposed? Abstaining. A small edit about, rather than saying multifamily, saying dense or residential.
Just so you know, there's an environmental group that wants to put special protection zones, especially along the Fairmont line. So I would have suggested that, but that's probably going too far. So the special protection zone, you get people that live already there, but probably not so much important, but also have affordable housing.
Yeah.
And this doesn't address affordable housing. But I'm sure that would get the suburbs up in hysteria. We may put
I actually think, I don't think Rutgers, well, we can do it another time. I can go on.
Let's have this on the agenda next month, so we're not shutting down discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you can take it up in operations as well.
Yeah.
So it's just more informal conversation.
Sure.
to understand, we approved the letter, but you still want to discuss it next month?
Well,
What do you
we put the letter, so you can post it,
Okay.
but it's just to say that we're not shutting down discussion, let's continue discussion, the issues that we brought up,
Okay.
and hash it out, learn something from each other, so.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this seems to warrant, as to Karen's point about the South Station expansion, maybe we need to revisit what the current plan is for that in order to become more educated about it. And I mean, I certainly haven't looked at it in over a year. I know that as of a year ago, I was strongly against it.
And the irony is, you're pro North-South rail link and I'm pro South Station expansion.
Exactly. This is why this committee is right.
Like, I actually am, like,
This is why this is a great committee of,
Need more
someone
public
around
hearings.
us.
This is good. All right, let's move to public comments.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm on.
Yes.
Yeah. You can stand anywhere in particular. I'll find you on camera.
The question of the orange line and red line shuttles on weekends, that affects me because I take both. And so on the orange line shuttle, it was relatively efficient. What they do is almost every station, the gates are open.
Yes.
You just walk in and it's at free fare. Similarly, many places in the red line, now that they're working on the red line. Having said that, this past couple weekends, I was taking the red line shuttle northbound, and it was going up A Street, and then Melcher Street, and then Summer Street over to South Station, which was a fairly efficient way, as opposed to Dorchester Avenue, which they had done in the past. But it was still efficient. The only thing is, I wanted to get to Downtown Crossing. So the stop for Downtown Crossing was at Franklin Street and Federal Street. So now they had signs saying that this is quote accessible, unquote. You're talking about a 6-block walk.
That's right, yeah, Dave Carney did mention that at the meeting, and he said, we couldn't come up with anything better than Federal and Franklin because it's an existing large, like whole block stop. That did come up, and he said they really think they tried really hard to find something else.
Because the 92 and 93 go up Washington Street.
You think that's a better route, or
Yeah,
as opposed to the Federal and Franklin?
yeah.
Okay.
The only thing is, they'd have to take a different routing. The way the Charlestown buses go.
Okay. It may be a little too late for this round of,
It may
Red line,
be
but-
too late, but I just wanted to raise the subject.
yeah, absolutely.
But, now, the question of having many of these gates open, I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad, but I just want you to be aware of the situation, because many people are just getting a free ride.
Right.
Do we want that, or do we not want that?
They might not know, a lot of people got passed.
Like, for example, I get on at Wallaston,
Yeah.
which is nowhere near the shuttle. And I was very surprised because the gates were open.
Oh, at Wallaston they
Oh.
were open. They were also open on the Green Line,
I don't know about the.
And they had nothing to do with the Green Line, it was because the Orange Line was down.
Okay, that's a surprise, that the gates would be wide open at Wollaston, which is still getting regular train service.
I think the assumption might be that if you were to encounter the shuttles,
You'd be
that would
upset.
be a significant downgrade in service. So you
So-
get a free ride.
Yeah.
From that
You just
standpoint, from that standpoint, since you're getting, even though it's free, you're getting crummy service, so.
But you are getting service.
Yeah, but they can't charge
see that.
for, if you were to go to Braintree to, JFK or something, and you want to interact with that, okay, yeah, you got a free ride. But if you're going to go through town, you can get on those shuttles and.
Okay,
all through.
that was one thing. Weeknights, they've been running shuttles from Oak Grove to
Wellington?
Wellington. And so about a month and a half ago, they said as of 8:15 PM, this starts. So I got there at just 8:15. There was a blue shirt at Malden. There was a blue shirt, but she was wandering around. She wasn't telling anyone anything. This was in the station itself. So the gates were not open. We go through with the gate normally, go upstairs, there are people waiting, and a train went south without stopping. And the sign that said, the next train, 9 minutes, now said, go downstairs and catch a bus. It didn't say it quite that way, but.
Okay.
So the train
That
probably
was
was
the
just
last.
going out of service.
It may have been the last, or may not have been the last, but there are other people waiting upstairs at the platform. No one came up and said anything,
But the
That
sign
would be
said,
better.
but the sign said.
yeah.
So I went downstairs and got a Yankee bus, and it must have sat there for about at least 10 minutes before we left. Now, all this sounded very strange because we weren't told anything. I mean, we weren't verbally told anything.
So what's your solution?
Huh?
What do you want the T to do?
Well,
Do you want them to have people there to talk to you? Is that,
because you have to know where does the bus leave from.
so you
and
need signs or you need
They
the
have
register?
some signs, but not all of the signs, and it doesn't say where when it's physically going to start. And they have, because at other times, what they do is they put a fence across the gates. Now, that's a statement. But I found this rather annoying because no one seemed to know anything about anything. And at that time, there are no officials around at all.
Well, that you can't, the officials can't be everywhere. But there may have been, should have maybe had red shirts or bigger signs or announcements, verbal announcements on their audio thing. When they say next thing coming in 3 minutes, it could have said, this is it for tonight.
Okay.
Or casting.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, we need to.
Last thing, since you mentioned announcements, oftentimes when there are changes of service because of emergencies, there are conflicting announcements. And the one thing I would suggest is that if there is some sort of emergency, to turn off these annoying announcements that don't spit in the floor or something like that. Or the next train is going to be there in 9 minutes or whatever. Just turn all that stuff off and tell us the important stuff.
Okay, Barry, I'm going to suggest that next meeting, you talk first, not at the end.
No.
Well, because I didn't think of it. I didn't think of it.
Motion to adjourn? No. Second? I got you. Thank you, Barry. Thank you very much.
Cool, I'm glad.
And we are
Why does
adjourned.
that push to have? Because
I am stopping the online stream. Thank you.
That was really everybody.